Good morning and welcome to all of you on behalf of Yale Divinity School, the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, and the Youth Ministry Initiative. We are glad you're here and glad that you are walking with us, yes, through the rainy portion of our pilgrimage together this week. We are now into day 4 of our week-long symposium, and it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce to you two dear friends. I'll tell you just a bit of a story. In 2001, our church and youth group were exploring where to go on a mission trip, and one of the places that we site visited was the Centro Cristiano Bethesda in Chicago. It's up near Fullerton and Cicero Avenues in northwest Chicago. Weren't exactly sure that was the right place for us, but we met Jorge Gonzalez and Rebecca Gonzales and their parents, and before we were willing to leave, their father, the senior pastor of the church, David Rivera, said, "May I just say a prayer for you on your way home?" The Holy Spirit descended so powerfully in his prayer, we were all just hugging and crying, and we knew this is it. When we got there with our kids, the congregation was on the street with signs and embraces. Our kids said, "We have never experienced so much love anywhere." And when the kids came home to do their youth Sunday, these sneaky folks from Bethesda got in buses on Friday night in Chicago, drove overnight, 58 of them, to be there for youth worship to surprise them. But we got wind, so we intercepted them on the New Jersey Turnpike, brought them into New York to show them around New York City and had a hotel ready for them. And then when they got to New Canaan, all our church was on the streets with signs to hug them. And that was the beginning of what we call Il Milagro. And our slogan is, "El milagro continua." And I know I never get this right, or continuara, right? Depending on the tense. And we have, and the speaker. And we have been on 7 mission trips together, our youth group and theirs, to Guatemala, to Puerto Rico, to South Carolina, to Opelousas, Louisiana, to Biloxi, Mississippi. It has been an amazing relationship. So Il Milagro Continua today, because I have an opportunity to introduce to you two dear friends. Jorge Gonzalez is the son of pastors, mom and dad. He grew up around the church at all times. He gave his life to the Lord in 1995, coming back into church, and in 1996 took the leadership as a youth leader of Powerhouse Ministries at their church, Centro Cristiano de Bethesda in Chicago. He's been a youth minister ever since, even though they, of course, make him work on Sunday mornings and preach and lead the entire church, but he has a virtual lifetime of experience. He took his degree from Living Word Bible Training Center and was ordained in 2012. And Jorge's presence today is what is the real heart of the vision of the Youth Ministry Initiative is, yes, there's theory, but there's practice. And we're going to get the benefits and the fruits of 20 years of youth ministry shared with us this morning. Pastor Rebecca Gonzales, daughter of mother and father pastors, granddaughter of grandparents who were pastors, and was, of course, that meant she was essentially ministering when she was 3 and 4 years old. A wonderful singer, Mayor Daley of Chicago, picked her out and asked her to lead worship for the entire city of Chicago when she was just a little girl, and went into the ministry with this Powerhouse Ministry when her brother formed it in 1994. She's a graduate of Oral Roberts University, and while there was part of their Oral Roberts evangelism outreach programs through their television programs. She went on to get a master's degree from North Park University. She has worked in the corporate setting, in the nonprofit setting, in the church setting. She was the vice president for programs at Casa Central, which is an amazing social justice outreach program that serves 20,000 folks, mostly in Hispanic neighborhoods in Chicago every year. She is now the executive director of operations for the Evangelical Covenant Church, which has 850 churches throughout the United States, Canada, and Alaska. But of course, she is still pastoring and youth ministering. So we have the opportunity to draw from a deep well today of a combined, even though they're only 28 years old, 40 years of youth ministry experience. Won't you please welcome my dear friends Jorge and Rebecca Gonzales.
Thank you. Well, good morning. It's an honor and a privilege to be here in Connecticut. Uh, as they mentioned, I'm from the city of Chicago. How many have visited? It's a lovely city. It's a beautiful city. I've lived there 40 plus years. Wouldn't think of moving out anytime soon. I've been doing ministry for quite some time. As you met my wife, Rebecca, it's been a blessing to work side to side with her and encouraging the youth in Chicago.
I gotta step. Thank you and good morning to every one of you. We are blessed with the opportunity God has granted us and Pastor Skip and Yale to be able to come and serve at this time and in this capacity. And we are very grateful for this time. And what we are to share, like Pastor Skip did say, it is, when we look at it, it's a miracle from our perspective. But when God sees it, it's definitely His working. So this is just what comes natural to Him, because He is almighty and all awesome. And so for us, it's just being able to put ourselves at a disposal for God to just work not only in us, but to work through us. And for that, for the many things that we could be involved in or be distracted to do or be asked to do, definitely in our hearts, through it all, we have a definite call for the younger generation, and more stronger today than in the past. And so in that, we just continue to seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit to lead us and continually prune us and point out in us anything that will distract us from that primary call in our lives. So we are excited about this morning and what God is doing and will continue to do. And so I think probably the first piece we're going to walk into is just a little exercise, both for you and for us. I think one of the things that we have learned through ministry is the importance of relationships. We could be involved in youth ministry so much in the lives of youth that at times we don't have time to build relationship within a network or peers of youth ministers. And sometimes the spare time that we have, we try to invest it in our family. So for the next couple minutes, we have an exercise that we want you to do at your table. And it's 3 questions, and you're gonna, I'm sure you've met the people at your table right now, but if you haven't, there's 3 questions that I want you to answer. One of them is, ask the person on your table and share, when did you take your last vacation? Right? And for some, that could be like, I even forgot.
Sure.
But when did you take your last vacation? What is the most recent movie, book, or documentary you've entertained? And number 3, your most embarrassing moment with your youth group or with a teenager. Okay, so if you could take just about 10 minutes or 10 or so minutes, 10 or 15 minutes to answer those 3 questions among your peers at your table. And then we'll have a little bit sharing across the room, so we could just have a little bit of fun and get to know each other before we get started with this morning, or actually as we continue this morning. So when did you take your last vacation, right? What is the most recent movie, book, or teenager? La luz for the PowerPoint, no?
Yeah.
Are you going to talk about the embarrassing moment? You have one? Probably from service or something. You could do that. I could do the book one and the movie. go for those Tyler Perry. That'll be great for those weeks. And the book I have is Unhurried Life and The Advantage. Huh? Think of one of the youth group because otherwise they would be putting them on the spot and not putting them. Something from camp or from one of the activities, one of the services. Yeah, they'll share. Yeah, we'll do scatter things around the room. Message? Oh, okay. And then you got it very.
Right. And then after that, watch it in the market.
That's fine. That's it. Should I go tell the guy over there about the lights?
Oh, he knows.
So about 2 more minutes of discussion.
Most embarrassing. Let me ask you.
That was a good one. The one that you said. Because you were preaching, nothing was happening. Right? That's a good one. Were you embarrassed, Anne?
Then we go to the next exercise.
Actually, no. We have to go into this perception. Yeah,
Perception.
yeah.
Back up.
Yeah. Because they have to talk into the mic.
So it's one per table, no?
I see a lot of smiles and some laughter. Start wrapping up the conversation, and we'll share with the group at this time in a few minutes. No, I'll see who wants to get up and share. Great. So if it's okay with you, we can begin to share some of these learnings that we've had over the last couple of minutes with the rest of the group. One thing that we have learned through working with youth is that there is a high level of transparency. And my husband and I are committed to that high level of transparency. And transparency can at times be very vulnerable. But you know, God, you know what? When you are surrendering unto God and you realize how great God's grace is, there is no problem with transparency and there's no problem with vulnerability. So part of getting to know each other at this room, and maybe we'll start just to help you in sharing this morning. So when the answer, when did you take your last vacation? When did you take your last vacation? Oh.
last week. We took our 9-year-old, Daniel, our 7-year-old, Lewis, to Disney World. Disney World. A beautiful family vacation. A lot of fun times. It's amazing how you learn from a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old daily. So I thank the Lord for the vacation that He has blessed us with.
See, if there's one thing we've learned of so many years of ministry is to take a vacation.
Yes.
10 years ago, it probably would have been some of the stories we'll hear today. But and what is the most recent movie, book, or documentary that you have entertained, or that we have entertained together? Well, obviously, since we have kids, Frozen. But we even learn God speaks to us, and our kids are constantly singing, "Let it go, let it go." So Frozen is one, because our kids love a movie night every Saturday night. That's what they hope we do, a family movie night, and so we've committed to that. But the other one that we've seen, Tyler Perry's Temptation, also ministered to us a lot. So you're going to see that we find God speaking to us through everything. And definitely movies and music is one of them. And the last book that we've entertained was number one of the books that I'm currently reading is An Unhurried Life, Learning to Live at God's Rhythm by Alan Fadling, Jesus' Rhythm of Work and Rest, and how not to feel guilty about that. And that is a big growing piece for me. And the other one, because of my administrative giftings and what I do and called to do in full-time ministry, also The Advantage by Collins. And my husband's going to share one of his most embarrassing moments with the youth group or with the teenager.
Well, as a preacher, you know that we have a lot of embarrassing moments at times with the congregation. And since I've been ministering to youth, there was a time, it was about 120 youth in the sanctuary having a good time preaching. There was a moment of silence. I said, God is good. Moment of silence. All of a sudden we hear a chair falling. Big boom. We look all to the side. The PowerPoint guy fell asleep. So I'm like, I have no PowerPoint. I have 120 youth looking at me. We were on fire a minute ago. So that was that for the last, I would say, 17 years or whatnot, that was my most embarrassing moment, because we had a full house, and he fell asleep. He fell asleep during the message.
Great. Can we hear some of your responses from your table that were either fun, interesting, encouraging, uplifting? What about, or maybe kind of awkward as far as, when did you take your last vacation? Did you hear something interesting at your table? No? Did someone go as far as over a year without taking a vacation? Maybe raise your hand. When was the last time you took a vacation?
Well, it wasn't a vacation, but for me, it was interesting when I went to Venezuela with the native Indians over there, and we were in the woods, really in the Amazon, and just sharing with them. Even though it was a missionary trip, it was, for me, it was really good.
A break from the pattern.
Yes.
And when was that?
That was, I have to say, it was like 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yes.
So so am I okay to conclude that in about 7 years or more, because that could be a break from the norm, but you're still in ministry, you haven't had a vacation?
Yes.
All right.
Sadly to
Anybody
say.
else? Come on, it's okay. Share. Anybody has been more than 10 years without a vacation, where you actually are not doing ministry, that you are investing time in yourself? Three years? 3 years without, 7 years without vacation. Yes, ma'am. It's been that long. How about 1 year? How many have taken a vacation in the past year? Raise your hand. Right. The reality is that for many of us who are in youth ministry, whether it be by devotion, full-time devotion, or part-time, vacations are very rare. And that was kind of the experience we would have. Even before we had when we didn't have children, it was okay for us to even have excuses not to take vacations. But we'll share more about lessons learned in a little bit. But that is the reality of many of those that work with youth ministry. And unfortunately, sometimes the culture, the context that we're in, so now I am working with the Evangelical Covenant Church, so they are supporting with sabbaticals and things of that nature. But from the context that I grew up with, my 3 generations of ministry, vacations and sabbatical were almost like a sin. When we took a sabbatical 2 years ago for my husband to finish school and get his ordination, it was almost like an exile, like we had betrayed the church. And we'll share more about that in a little bit. But that is the reality for many of us. So what is the most recent movie, book, or documentary? Let's see. I'll take a couple. Who wants to share? Go ahead. Think biblically. John MacArthur. Good. Yes, sir. Great. Communicating for Change by Andy Stanley. Great. I saw a hand go up around in the middle of the room. A book, movie, cartoon? Oh, okay, yes. Claiming Disability by Sammy Linton. Yes, and then we'll come over here. $1 Million Arm. Okay. Great. Yes? Sure. Yes. Yeah. Many of the teens were drawn to that title. Yes, would you like to share?
Book, Understanding the Power and Purpose of Prayer by Miles Monroe.
Yes. Go ahead. Yes. Very good. Oh, yes. Magnificent. Oh, but some of our younger teens are drawn to that, right? And it's very important to see what they're looking at, what messages are being invaded, how, certain concepts are being decorated and masquerade. So, very good. And yes.
Good morning. Sometimes I just have to read for fun. I do a lot of reading for work. So I read The Goldfinch. It's a great book. It was really fun to read. And then I have a bad habit of reading the same author. So then I read The Secret History by the same author. And it's fun because sometimes I had to be removed from, preaching or ministering or those things. And I just have to disappear into a book.
Yes. That's exactly right. It's taking that break, disconnecting, right? To just really break them on what might be exciting and might be a call, but we can become a monotony if we don't step outside, look outside to then be able to reflect and come back and be renewed and refreshed to do our work. And my husband can manage the most embarrassing moment, and we probably could take 3 and then we'll move on. So I know that might be hard because we are in an open room, but we went ahead and put ourselves on the limb and shared our most embarrassing moments. So let's hear about 3.
Okay, you know that sometimes when you're preaching in Spanish and somebody else is translating, so it's not the same thing. And I was teaching actually to girls and ladies, and there was this young girl that she was translating me, and I was saying in Spanish that there was a bad situation, pero in English is but, right? And so I said, hay un pero bien grande, and she said, and there's a big but, and then she paused, and she said, what? And everybody laughed, and it was hard then for me to, you know, but what can you do?
Yeah, there was a big comma, and except of the big comma, she did the literal translation. That's a good one. Very good. Anybody else? So there's been 2 shared. Who wants to share one from your table or one of your own personal experience? Feel free, come on. Help us have fun this morning. Anybody else? Oh, yes? Okay.
2 summers ago, we took the youth group fishing, and everyone in the group was catching a fish, and by the late in the afternoon, I had not caught one. And right before we were about to wrap up, I did catch one, and I turned around to brag to everyone, and I stepped right off the pier, right into the water. And that's a fish.
So I had a moment just recently. I don't know if it was my most embarrassing, but I was at a fellowship meal with some folks from church, and we were talking, and subject of books came up, and everybody was talking about their favorite recent book that they've read, and somebody said, "Oh, John, what's a good book that you've read recently?" And I couldn't think of a book that I'd read recently for pleasure outside of work, and so that was one moment for me. A wake-up call to escape.
Right. Yeah. So youth ministry and life has to be fun. And we can't forget to stop and to laugh and to take breaks, to reflect, to enjoy. And I hope that as we go into the subject matter of this morning, that you remember those 3 things. Remember to take time for yourself. Remember to take time to, do something outside of your call or outside of your day-to-day thing, whether it be read a book, watch a movie, or watch a documentary. And the third one, have fun. God has not called us to be perfect. He has not called us to be serious. He has called us to have an abundance, a great life, a good life. And many times our happiness and our smiles and our joy can become filled with resentment or stress or burden. And so I hope that at least through that exercise you can remember that. So right before we go into our full outline here and structured discussion, we have one more exercise, and this one's going to move us up and out of our seats for a second. We have, this is called perceptions, or we have called it perceptions. And so we have some pictures placed on the chairs right over here. And we're going to ask you to get up and move around and come forward and pick a picture that helps you define either how you feel right now about youth ministry, how you perceive youth ministry, or how youth ministry has been to you. You're going to take that picture, take it back to your table, and share with your peers at the table why you have selected that picture. Okay, so we don't want to take too long, but we want to have a point of reflection in the pictures. Mm-hmm. So feel free to get up, and at the same time, if you need to get water or a bathroom break, do it now, because then we are in full force, full speed ahead. We'll give one more minute for you to share your perception with your colleagues, and then we'll open it up for a group discussion. Please remember, if you need to grab water or have a bathroom break, to do it at this time. Perceptions. So just like the previous exercise, we're going to invite, for some of us, to volunteer and share with us which picture did you choose and what did that picture represent for you at this time in your season in youth ministry and youth work. And we're just going to just do this for about 5 minutes, so if you could be brief, but if in essence give us the summary of why you picked the picture. And maybe we could have about 5 or 6 sharings, and so who would volunteer to go first? Raise your hand so we could also provide the mic. Go ahead. Thank you.
The choice was keys, and in youth ministry, keys would open doors that are locked for me and give me the wisdom that I need to work with them.
Good morning. I took this picture because spoke to me. It's a lot of people doing exercises and doing physical exercises, and I pointed out to me to do 2 things: what I need to do as a priest in terms of learning and getting prepared and getting something under my belt, so I get ready for something that may come up. I am a missioner in Dover Plains, New York, and I started on November. I have about 6 or 7 youth, and I don't know what to do. Not because I don't know what to do, but I don't know what to do in terms of delegating. I don't have leadership. I have the building salary, but that's about it. So I kind of in a new ground, and so I'm thinking that I'm asking God to get me ready and prepared for this that is coming, that I see there is a need, and perhaps having this symposium next year and send one of them to come and be ready to be one of the lay leaders for the youth group without salary, which is the reality of mine. And experiencing also reflecting upon the table, I share with them that there are things that are not being said in this particular context. In my context, I have youth that are 17, 18, 19 years of age who come to work on a full-time basis, to have the responsibility to, for themselves and also for those that they left back home. And they also want to go to school. At least one of them had expressed that desire. How do I help that? Because in that end, it's not much about having fun, coming in, meeting God and so forth, which is also needed and is great. How do I cope with those particular needs that are there? And last night I was talking to one of them and I said, would you be interested in taking school at night? He said, I'd be delighted to. I want to learn, but I have to work. So this is what this picture brought me to think about. Thank you.
And we'll share some of our story as we go through, and you could learn a little bit and hopefully be inspired by some of the things we did as it pertains to that perspective. I think I saw hands towards the back, or...
I picked the yoke of bondage.
Yeah.
Reason being is because our ministry, Victory Outreach, we're real interventive in the inner city because we deal with youth that are caught up in drugs and gangs and, you know, real bondage. So we're believing God to break the yoke of bondage in their lives.
I chose the handcuffs. And the reason for that is I've been in church all my life, and I grew up in what I call an old school Pentecostal household. My dad was a minister and whatnot, so every time as I grew up, I had no ideas as to how to move forward and expand, but they always put me in that box and handcuffed me. So I wasn't able to proceed as I wanted to, so that he didn't see it as a help. He saw it more of an obstacle, because I was going away from tradition, if you will.
Yes. And obviously, coming from, I could understand and relate your background and context, because that's where we grew up in too. But I also have learned that it's not just about the old traditional Pentecostal. For many who are in youth ministry, those handcuffs, they can relate to them regardless of the denomination or regardless of the context. Because not always is there a church, is there a pastor that fully understands the heart and passion of those who are called to do youth ministry. Someone else? We'll take two more.
I picked this apple tree because I've learned when I first started, I was very forceful about the ministry. I had a vision. And if anybody's here is a visionary, it's a painful thing to be a visionary, because you dream about what is to come, but you wake up to what is. And so I realized that I am a seed, and in due season I will grow, and even though it's difficult and the circumstances are sometimes longing and hard, and 6 months of winter, but I've learned that the snow thaws you out only to save you to grow bigger and stronger. So in due season everything will come to pass.
Yes.
I chose the eagle because it represents renewal. And sometimes when it takes me back to when the eagle feels old and the peak is not working as it is, and then he just hides into the highest rock and just renews itself. And I think that youth sometimes feel that way, and God always gives them an opportunity within him, who he is the rock, to renew and start a new life.
Thank you. Now we're going to be sharing some of our perceptions.
Our perceptions for the youth ministry that God has placed in our hands. My personal perception has been oil reserve. When I look at the youth, I don't see a liability. I see an asset. I see riches. I see, first, I have to have patience to find their gift. And once I find that gift, I draw from that gift. So when I see them, I see one of them, it's oil reserve. The second thing that I see, it's a mine with precious jewels, precious stones. ready to be found and shown to the world. Every young person that's come through the ministry has had a potential, has had a talent, has had a gift. It's our job to find that gift and to give it a pedestal and shine. That's our job as youth ministers.
For me, I love colors, and so when I look at the set of color pencils, what it speaks to me is the fact that every color is unique and every youth is unique. In the past years that we have had, not one youth can be replicated. However, the unique thing about colors, whether they be color pencils, color crayons, or color paints, when you start using them and blending them together, it's just beauty that comes forth in whatever shape, form or design that it takes. So that is what youth are to me. Once they are in the right context and being used in the right way, you'll have beautiful art and beautiful life, regardless of what shape it takes. And the next one, I am very connected to many of the teachings in the scriptures that talk about seed time and harvest. And so youth ministry, for me, it is representative of this. There is a time of sowing, of doing seeds. There is a time of nurturing and cultivation. Then when you see the starting of it, doesn't mean it's time for harvest or that it's ready to be, to face the world. It takes a time for maturity. And then, therefore, then you have the time of the harvest similar to that of wheat. And that is what youth work and youth ministry represents for me. Obviously, part of our discussion today is mining potential. And so this perception is actually what we have drawn as perception is part of our work over the last 18 to 20 years in youth ministry. And for a large portion and a large segment of our time, that was done at our local church at Bethesda Christian Center with our pastors, David and Ruth Rivera. More recently, God has also called us to serve outside of the church and to expand on that, and we'll be sharing with that the next couple minutes.
This is our Powerhouse Youth manual. When we took over the Powerhouse ministry, there was no manual, there wasn't a vision, there wasn't a structure. So when we came in, that's what we came with. We brought to the table the structure, the manual. Our key verse is Psalms 25:5. Lead me by your truth and teach me, for you are the God who has saved me. Many of the youth, 90% of the youth that have come to our church, been led by lies all their life, by deceptions, by broken promises. So when I prayed and God revealed to me and took me to the Psalms 25:5 and said, they need to know the truth. They need to know that not only the truth, but I'm leading that truth. Okay? I'm going to teach them my way. Because all their life they've been taught the wrong way, the street way. And to let them know that there's a God that has saved them. That they're not condemned, but they're saved. But in order for them to be saved, they have to know that they're saved. So that's one of the scriptures that God placed in my heart. And the youth embraced the verse, the key verse for the Powerhouse Youth Ministry. From the minute that they become saved, the first verse that they learn is Psalms 25:5. Because they need to know that there is a truth. And that is the gospel of God. And we have a mission. Our mission is respond to the spiritual, emotional, and physical needs of the youth and provide a platform for potential. Spiritual, emotional, physical. Very key. We call it in the youth ministry SEP. SEP, spiritual, emotional, and physical.
I do want to mention that this mission came out of our church mission. So it wasn't a separate mission. The spiritual, emotional, and physical was part of, embedded in our church vision and mission. And all we did was, what does spiritual, emotional, and physical mean to youth? So for us, it was important to respond specifically to the needs of youth. So that's the first half of the mission statement. The second one was, then we have a responsibility to provide a platform. And both the logo, the key wording, the world is just not enough, and the scriptures were things that we developed together with the youth. It wasn't like we went to a retreat, my husband and I, and we went to 40 days of prayer and fasting, and God gave us this divine revelation. We were actually in the trenches with the youth because we wanted to start giving ownership to the youth group about, what does church mean to you? What does youth ministry mean to you? And together with them, they actually were the designers of the logo. And then we would tweak and add it within a same framework. They were exercising their gift. They were engaging in critical thinking and strategic thinking, though they did not know that that's what they were doing. We were shaping them and working with them, and then we went to an agreement together on the components that you are seeing. But it's very critical with youth ministries that are always working with a church, within a church context, that our mission was a reflection of our church mission. So I just want to mention that.
Ministry goals: spiritual, emotional, and physical. Spiritual, Wednesday night Bible study. How many have Bible studies in their church? Weekly. Youth-led prayer. How many have youth-led prayer? Okay. Fasting and virtual service, right? Creating workshops, experience, peer groups, discipleship, home visitation. When was the last time we visit the homes of our youth in the youth ministry? When we don't see them on a Friday night, and we're wondering on Monday morning or Monday evening visitation. The key to the youth ministry is that relationship part. One-on-one. Text is not enough for youth ministry. Email is not enough for youth ministry. One-on-one is more than enough. That personal connection. We have lost that personal connection in 2014. We have to get that back. Jesus went to the people. The people didn't come to Jesus. He always went to them. So, in saying that, every time I visit a young person, it's like going to a candy store. Once they see you, their eyes open up. It's like them being at Toys R Us, and they found their favorite toy. You actually miss me? You actually noticed that I wasn't in service? You actually know my name? Transforming lives, creating a platform for them. Discipleship, open gym outreach. Open gym outreach, let me just give you a summary of what's an open gym outreach. On Thursday nights, I will open up the gym. We have a youth center, full basketball court, workout room, game room, but I will open it up to the community, to the gang members. And I will only allow certain youth leaders that were ready to work with them and see me working with these gang members. Friday nights at 1 o'clock in the morning, I will go pick up about 20 to 25 gang members from their corner. Bring them into our youth center in our van. The agreement I had with the gang leader was, I will feed you, I will provide a place that is safe from 1 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the morning. And all I want is to pray with you, just to get to know you guys. I will bring them out to the church and be all night with them. I kid you not. I've had more problems with kids that their parents go to church than these gang members that were in the church. They were, Mr. Gonzalez, Pastor, how can I help you? Pastor, could we do this? Pastor, could we do that? All they need is love. All they need is that attention. All they need is the love that they have never received. 90% of them are fatherless. And for you to bring them to a safe place take them out of their comfort zone, bring them literally into the church, because I consider the youth center the church, and really doing ministry through that. So open gym outreach is one of the key elements that God has given me to use it for those youth that are lost, for those gang members that are lost, to bring them out. So if you're not having an outreach in your community, in your church, that is so key. We are called to save. We are called to not be afraid, but be empowered by the Holy Spirit and go and take the word to them. So I believe that the most important part of the spiritual is the outreach for me.
As you see the list of the elements that we have listed, remember that we mentioned responding to the need of youth, but it's not responding to a youth as a mass. We have identified the needs of youth where they're at in our youth group at different stages. So for someone who's working the streets, right, and this level of gang members, and these are people that we also partner with people that are actually working the streets. This is what their calling is in life full time. So we are partnering with them and part of the outreach and bringing them in. But this is not about being physical and having just sports.
Right.
Because where they are in their journey in life, this is something very spiritual for them. Because instead of being on a corner, instead of being in violence or in drugs, for that moment of time, they're in God's house. And we believe that God is so great and so gracious and so awesome that he doesn't need us to be preaching the whole time to get somebody saved. Just by the fact of them being in what we have called his house of prayer, should be enough to trigger a thought, a little question, or a little spark in that youth life about, there's something different about this place. And that little spark of curiosity will bring them back and start the conversations. But how are they going to start the conversations if you don't make the sacrifice to be there? Now, my husband can understand, this population and this context a little bit more because of his upbringing and his experience where he was youth. And so he knows where to position himself to be ready for when that spark and that question and that curiosity triggers. He's already there, have given them a high five, have given a pat in the back, has cheered them on, so that then when the spark, he's like, what is it that I feel? Or what is it about this place? Or what is it that happens here? And through that, we begin a journey that would take time, but we have seen it to bear fruit. And so through it all, it is built on the concept of discipleship, just like Jesus did with his disciples. And so just walking along. And you know that every single disciple was at a different journey in their faith and their relationship and revelation about who God was and who Jesus was. But Jesus loved them all unconditionally. And so for that reason, these are all our spiritual responses.
Emotional. Very key. Building one-on-one relationship through weekly contact. Hold monthly social activities, right? Hold and attend workshops. Awareness, build capacity. Celebrate birthdays and achievements. Acknowledge them. Acknowledge them in their birthdays. It's so key. I've known at least 80% of parents that forget their son's and daughter's birthday. You should see their eyes when you show up at their high school with balloons, with a card. And you give it to them. Okay. In behalf of Bethesda Christian Center, in behalf of the church, this is for you. Happy birthday. God has blessed you with another year of life. And with those words said, you leave. Totally change. Their friends are like, who was that? That was awesome. Something so simple can change somebody's life. Just acknowledging them and their birthday. And their birthday.
Supporting performing arts ministries. Mm-hmm. So we, the youth group had some level of performing arts. And what we basically did was begin to empower the youth themselves to lead those performing arts group. So we had drama, we had dance, we had hip hop and liturgical dance. Both of them are different. Worship, spoken word. And so through all of those different elements, and then we started building also opportunities for them to engage in elements that are part of the overall church ministry: PowerPoint, sound, leading prayer, doing communion. All of those elements, we began to provide opportunities for them to learn, grow, and exercise them without being criticized, without being judged. And we began to basically create environments and outlets within the youth group that basically would make it appear as a youth church. So now youth would no longer see like church, we can't relate it to it or understand it, but church is fun and church is a great thing. And so it was something that was not only there to nurture their spirit, but also to nurture their soul. And that is performing arts. And also, I want to mention, in addition to the birthdays and achievements, cotillions, graduations, we would be at all of them. If we weren't there together, we would be taking turns with the leaders at times when there was a lot of them. And we started encouraging and celebrating, a lot of celebration of life. And you should see how that contributed to their well-being and gave them confidence that someone believed in them, that someone took the time, that somebody cared. And that built their stamina and built their confidence. We created events where youth can exercise their talents, like I mentioned. We had even youth leaders that created a whole weekend of activities for their peers. And so our youth group, and we'll go into the youth group ages in a little bit and how we structure that. But basically, we were be there for them. Sometimes their visions were so great that I was like, oh my God, I don't know what they're getting into. But the reality is that I would stick with them. And maybe for them, it would cost them 2 weeks of work. Those 2 weeks of work would cost me maybe a week of overnights of just trying to put things together behind the scenes for them. But I wanted them to see that their vision can be realized. And then we will have a discussion about the challenges or the new learnings that they had through that experience so that then they could learn and improve going forward. And then mend the bridges of communications with parent and youth relationship. One thing that we realized in youth work is that it's not just working with youth, it's working also with their parents. There is a handout that is on your table. And if you could look at that handout, at the bottom there's double-sided, look at the part that says L. There's an L on the bottom of the sheet, right? Okay, in the center circle, write the word youth. And then in the circles around them, can you start writing which relationships you think are important and critical for youth or youth ministry? It might be 2 or 3, but we wanted to put some extra circles just in case. Or you might fill them all up. Okay, so you have the diagram in front of you. The center circle represents a youth or youth ministry. And many times, as youth ministers and youth leaders, we are focused on that relationship. And we're not conscious of the relationship the youth have that are important to their development. And so what we're doing right now is kind of like doing a reflection according to your own experience and to your own perception the L's for leader. But I wanted to cue it like this so then we could have the other side that we'll discuss in a few minutes. So in the center, you write the word youth, and in the circles around it, at least in your thought and your experience, what would be relationships that are important to the youth? It could be just a parent, and you just put parent in one of the boxes. But if one, in your context and in what you have experienced, there's other people that are important or other entities, you might want to write them down there. Yeah, so there's 8 circles. How many filled out the 8 circles? Raise your hand. 1, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many? 7. How many filled out 5 circles? How many filled out 2 circles? How many filled out 1? Okay. So what is this exercise, what is going to help us to reflect and understand is that what we have learned, that in effective youth ministry, in doing effective youth ministry, that really helps have the long-term effects on the life of a youth, is not only doing efforts or helping or being conscious of the youth leader relationship. It's very important to also think of all the relationships that are important to the life of that youth. Because as youth leaders, we are there for a time and a season, and they will move forward beyond you. Yes, they can survive. That is true. They will live, and they will have successful lives, but they're not going to be with you or under your covering and teaching for their whole life. That would be abnormal, because imagine an 18-year-old that is still in the 5th grade classroom. Same thing with our journey with God and spirituality. So if we're talking about emotional growth, what are we doing to help the youth and empower the youth to be able to be conscious and aware that the other entities or the other individuals or the other sources are important relationships for them to have in a healthy, sound manner? And so now flip the sheet and you could do the comparison. So for our experiences and our lessons learned, we learned that the parent-youth relationship is important, that the school-youth relationship, school and teachers. Sometimes we were talking with teachers and counselors and engaging with them. The relationship with their peers and empowering them and making conscious of them that their peers are important, but also the peers have an influence on them. And how can they manage and negotiate and not compromise through those relationships? The other relationship is the youth relationship with their siblings, which is critical at times, especially if the home is a dysfunctional family. Another one that is very important is the relationship of the youth with its community. While we are citizens of heaven, we are citizens of this earth for right now in time and season, and we have a responsibility to exercise citizenship. Contribute back, give back. We would do clean days around our neighborhood. We would paint graffiti, pick up garbage. We would be out there. We would be providing community service opportunities in whatever context that would be. So youth relationship with their community, we would raise consciousness and awareness and provide opportunities there. The youth relationship with a church, regardless of that church would be. It doesn't have to be our church, but they are part of the church, the body of Christ. And how, as a growing individual and as a unique individual, how do I build a relationship with the church body, the body of Christ? Obviously, the other one is media. As youth leaders, you have to be conscious and aware of what is the relationship that the youth are building with media. Facebook, Twitter, email, text, TV, movies, and music. We, in ourselves, our favorite station might not be something that is, per se, all the time, B96 if you're in Chicago, but, hip-hop and pounding and rapping. But at least once a week, you will see us on Billboard's top 20 for hip-hop, for rap. We will be on YouTube looking for the popular names, what are the kids listening to. And we would take some of those words and those messaging and turn it around and put God's word into it and make a message out of it. There's a famous Spanish rapper, his name is Daddy Yankee. So he had a song, Rompe, 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 which means breaking, 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 right? But obviously he had it in his context. So we took that song and we brought it into a whole month series about breaking the bondages. So right before the sermon would hit, we would have rompe, 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 and the kids would be like, what is that? But we were building the relationship, and we were telling them, we know you have a relationship with the media. We know you're listening to the radio. But even through that, God is speaking to you. And the last one is their relationship with God. That one-on-one relationship with God. So, sorry if I've complicated your life right now, because it's not just one relationship between youth leader and youth. It is many relationships that you are called to shepherd. And to do youth ministry effectively, you have to seek God's guidance and the Holy Spirit's wisdom to figure out how you engage and help youth to have healthy engagements with all those stakeholders. And last but not least, physical. Our ministry goals in the physical arena.
Our physical goals: game room, open gym. Well, we will open the youth center a half hour before Bible study on Wednesdays. On Friday nights, what we will do is open the youth center at 6 o'clock. At 8:15, everyone in the youth center goes downstairs to the main sanctuary. Everyone. Saved, unsaved youth will go downstairs for 1 hour. 8:30 to 9:30. 9:30, everybody will go back up to the youth center and fellowship. I kid you not. You will give them, if we will give the youth the attention from 6 to 8:30. Play with them. Whether it was working out, playing basketball, being in the game room, if you will give them that time and build that relationship, when you take them down to the sanctuary to feed them the gospel, to feed them the good news, they will listen. Because you took your time that you will never have ever to relive, invested in them. And half of the youth are just waiting to have an ear to hear their story. So basically what I've done is to hear what they have to say first before I speak to them. Before I even get them saved, I have to know where they're at and meet them exactly where they're at. Not expect for them to come to me, but meet them where they're at in life and listen to their story. And not only listen to them, but getting engaged, play with them, joke around with them, laugh, cry with them. That's been the key element to the ministry that we have, is the relationship. You want a young man, the toughest young man, to listen to you? Listen to him first. Embrace him first. I've worked with one of the leaders of one of the biggest gang in Chicago, and he came about 15 years ago and visited us on a Friday night. Gave him a word, he left, never came back. 2 months ago, he came back. He's an adult. He's a third-generation gang member from his family. He's the leader. I go, how can I help you? He tells me, well, I want help. I want change. I want a new beginning. And you're the only person that can help me with this. I go, and I looked at him, I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, I'm not ready for church, but I'm ready to sit down with you in the youth center so you can listen to me. Once he said those words, it was a confirmation that anytime God allows me to be with a young person and to listen to their story and to plant a seed of hope in them, even if I don't see the harvest instantly, sooner than later, that harvest is going to come. When he came back, and I'm working with him, he's ready to start all over. If he comes to the Lord, there's going to be 50 plus guys that are going to follow him. If you get the leader involved, the followers will follow. So youth centers, using the fitness center, using the court, using the game room to outreach before service, it's an awesome, awesome tool that God has given every one of us. Why not use it? Amen? Seasonal sports, fitness schedules, becoming aware of prevalent needs in their home of the youth, and seek resources that meet their needs of the youth. Provided health and fitness training. I started the ministry through a weight room. I started training young high school students, football players. We'll go to the weight room. As we're working out, I'm encouraging them. I'm injecting what God has done in my life into their life. I say, well, when I was in high school, I did this mistake, but I never had anybody to give me that advice. So as we're sweating in the gym and working out, indirectly, I'm preaching the Word of God to them with my life.
The prevalent needs are needs as food, economics, homelessness. And so we do not come from a privileged background by any means. But God has given us the grace to build relationships and engage in kingdom building with people from around the country and even around the city. So it's not a matter of you having your inventory and storehouse to meet all the needs of your youth. It's a matter of having that network that you can tap in to basically give your youth and their families and your youth group the access to respond to the specific needs. Even for the gym and the youth center that we have today, our church bought a warehouse, an old golf manufacturing plant. And through collaborations and ministry with the church and New Canaan Congregational Church, it took years to build it to this place for the youth of the city of Chicago. So it's not necessarily important that you be the jack of all trade and the expert that can meet all the spiritual, emotional, and physical needs of the youth that you are called to serve. But we do have a responsibility to build the networks, to look outside of our box or outside of our church or outside of our context. Look who's serving homeless youth. Look for who has the food pantries. Look who's giving out the summer youth programs or the summer jobs. Who's employing youth. And then from there, then you begin to build relationships and open the doors, have the keys, open the doors so then your youth can, access those resources. The other thing, health and fitness is very important for Latinos. Do you know that in Humboldt Park has the largest Latino population of diabetes in the U.S. because of poor diets, because of lack of awareness and understanding. And so for us to promote fitness and health was something that was important to our context. Maybe in your context, the youth are healthier. But what is the needs of the youth in your area? Is it depression or alcoholism? Is it more emotional on the cutting and eating disorders? You have to identify what are the needs of the youth and where God has called me. And God, lead me. Give me grace before people. Show me what do I do? And then you become to steward all those resources on behalf of the youth that you are called to serve. There were some activities that we would do that would have all these three components. Summer programs, which ours was called PH Boot Camp, and they love it. I mean, they're calling us since January and February. Are you having summer boot camp this summer? So that is something that is all encompassing all those points, but it's around steps and kind of like a tough love military thing, but it is a lot of tough love. And actually the seniors and juniors end up being the leaders. So they start coaching and discipling and being a training opportunity for them. We had actually grants from the city of Chicago for after school and mentoring programs. We also had concerts, both in the church, and one summer they were so stirred up, we wrote a proposal to do community concerts, 1 hour for 4 weeks in the 4 community parks right around our church. We built the stage and everything where we would all be walking from our church to the park, set it up with audio and everything, throw the 1-hour concert breakdown, and be in and out in 90 minutes. And it had dance, it has music, it had an issue that was pertaining to youth. And because we wanted to work with the park district, we did not necessarily preach the gospel, but we raised awareness of who we are, where can we be found, and an issue that was prevalent to our community. Teen pregnancy was one, we talked about it. Sexually transmitted diseases was another week, we talked about it. Violence was another one, and this was a couple years ago, so I can't remember what was the last one. We called it Music in the Park. The kids they even did the signage that we had. It was about 3 plywoods long. They would carry it. So the whole community would see us walking down. 2 days before the event would be taking place at the park, we would be passing flyers house by house to all the households. Come out and see this concert by the youth of Chicago for the youth of Chicago. And sure enough, the people were there. And our kids had a platform, and they had a voice, and they were being heard. And so from week 1, then they followed us to the second park. From second park to the third park. And then by the third week, we had other community organizations bringing in their talent, their youth talent, to be part of it. And we accommodated them. Now today, the city of Chicago has music in the park in all of their park districts. When we had this, there was no music in the park in the city of Chicago. There was a music in the park that I remember seeing a sign in a suburb. And people were sitting in their nice little lawn chairs. And I was like, man, what would that be for the youth in our community? And from that, it threw a spark. And then I went and shared it with the youth leaders, and it blew into, what it is today. So that is really, we basically did everything in our youth group, all the activities and all the components drove around these 3 areas of goals.
Vision. Through relationships, challenge youth to become leaders of excellence. Again, emphasizing on the relationship. Through relationship, you build leaders. Through relationship, you find that gold mine, that precious stone within the youth. And they become themselves. One of the things that I've learned with working with youth that are lost in the street, that there's always a leader. They're natural-born leaders. Natural-born leaders. If they will do what they're doing for the streets for the Lord, there wouldn't be no problems. We wouldn't have no issues of violence. So all we have to do is, through relationship, fish them. Through relationship, bring them to the Lord. Through relationship, let them know, you know what? You're running a multi-million-dollar business from this corner illegally. But you can do it legal for the Lord. You have the mind of Christ. And if God is with you, who can be against you? And bring them and teach them, show them, lead them by God's word. Through relationship. Through relationship.
And leaders of excellence doesn't mean that they have to be perfect or that they have to meet a certain criteria or that they have to obtain a certain degree. Leaders of excellence is knowing that they have the power to influence. And influence is everything. And that wherever context they are called to live in and to do, they can be a leader. If they end up being a parent at a young age, they can be the leader of that household and be a father to that child so that that child doesn't experience what they experience. If they are called to serve in youth development, they are to be the best at what they can do. Excellence for us and for our youth group is just doing your best. God will help you the rest of the way. It's not a standard of perfection. It's not getting a master and a college degree. It's about doing your best. When we began youth ministry, and until this day, I've been the only youth from my church that has been born and raised in Humboldt Park, has gone ahead and gone away for a 4-year education, finished in 3.5, came back and have served. That is not the story for the kids in our neighborhood. Now, it wasn't when we started the youth group. We barely had to help our youth groups to start hitting high school. But the first generation, we started helping them to get to school and do their homework. Then the next group was finishing high school or GED. Then the next group, okay, finish high school, GED, or go to junior college. Or military. The military can provide you a great career. But that's if that's what you are called to do. If you believe that that environment is going to give you the growth and development that you need. Then the next group, actually some started going to the local colleges. We have now powerhouse members that have graduated from the University of Chicago, from DePaul University, from Loyola University, and from other in the Midwest. Some have not come back, but they're living their life of excellence in whatever context that they are called to do. They're across the different United States. We go different places, and sometimes we're like, and they're like, oh, pastor. And I'm like, who is this? And it was one of our powerhouse youth members from years ago. We didn't know we were going to find them in that environment, right? And now we actually have we have a former powerhouse member who's at the University of Wisconsin Medical School. And we just got notice this week that one of them got a great score on the exam for med school and will be applying now during the summer and getting ready to go into med school. But that was not our community. That was not our youth group. That was not our context. But in encouraging them and building relationships and granting them opportunities, they're becoming leaders of excellence wherever. Doesn't mean all of them will be there. But we have kids that never met their father who are now in a marriage relationship. We have single mothers that didn't opt to adopt and are single mothers and are successfully raising their children. It's not a matter of the picture that I want for them. They have to live the life and be responsible for the choices that they make. But even when they make a wrong choice, they still can make it good. And that's what's important. Be leaders of excellence. And just because you've made a bad decision and you got pregnant doesn't mean that you cannot be a great mom. And that's where it is, through relationships. Our youth group began and was all together, but then as it started growing, we started inventing different age groups because the needs were different. And, when they start commingling, we have a lot of things that can happen, right? So we had junior powerhouse, we had powerhouse or P-high, and then we have the PH search because basically through the years of ministry, we have now, we had youth that started going into their 20s. And then we just did a cutoff age because some of them just didn't want to be weaned away, so we did that. There was a membership. We set it up where they would have, like a gym. And you should see how excited they would get about their membership, right? So if you just came, we had visitor members and PH leaders, and we had criteria. They knew what that was, and if they wanted to work towards it, they definitely could. And can you believe? I don't know if you can see the screen.
We will have actual IDs with their picture taken, and they will come in and just show us the IDs. And some of them will actually use it in the CPS school system. They will give free bus rides if you had a school ID. They will show their powerhouse ID and ride the bus for free after school. So we were well known in the city of Chicago at one point.
And our expectations for them were simple. Mm-hmm. Not a big 10 commandment thing, just simple. Number one, be honest. Number two, be real. If you're smoking pot and you're high, just tell me. Don't deny it, don't hide it from me. Right. Just tell me. The other one, be optimistic. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. The other one is have an open heart and mind, and we're going to talk about a little bit at the end of the context of apathy for our youth and our community, and how that is one of the biggest deterrents of youth development for our community. It's just apathy. They're not optimistic. They don't have a hope. They don't believe there is a tomorrow. And then an open heart and mind so that God and the Holy Spirit can speak to them. And then be a team player. Be part of the team. Be part of the family. Be part of the group. And if you work long enough in youth ministry, you know cliques can develop, and isolation and bullying. So we would address that from the top. So you want to become a member of the youth group, you have to be committed to being a team player. And when cliques would start forming, we would start infiltrate them. How would we infiltrate them? The youth themselves, because there was categories, right? Visitors, members, and PH leaders. So the leaders would be being proactive in trying to prevent the cliques from happening. And the member rules were in the back of the ID. So they carried these with them everywhere they went. So I'm going to go back to this right there. So in the back of the ID, it was double-sided, and we had the rules listed there. And we made sure that we articulate them in one sentence statements. And those were the general rules. And they did them, and they would commit to them. And once a year, we would have an annual meeting. We would review this whole thing together once a year. So, we took that concept out of corporate America, and we brought it into our youth group and started having these one-year commitments and recall and commitment to the youth group. And that was our experience in the youth group ministry. Now, that's not our only experience. God has also called us to do more. When I was pregnant with my second son, I was in bed rest for 7 months. And that was a big transformation in my life of how I did youth ministry, because I could no longer be out Friday night. And even when I had my child at the beginning, I almost tried to go back and try to keep up with it, but I couldn't. So then I was called more into the ministry of intercession and one-on-one ministry and coaching of the ones that were the PH leaders. And also, and then my husband will continue with the youth leadership, managing the Powerhouse ministry. And then he's also engaged in ministry on the streets or in other ministries, and we've been able to also engage in coaching and being there a friend to others who are youth ministry. I also now serve on boards that are serving youth in the city of Chicago. One of them is Inner City Impact, who has a great discipleship program and takes youth to summer camp. And through that summer camp experience, they're introduced to Christ as the Savior. And that's an organization that manages about $2 million in just discipleship and camping experiences for youth. And God has also granted me the opportunity to serve on the board of Bethany Health. It was a hospital that closed, and they dedicated about $25 million of their profit to being invested in Humboldt Park, Lawndale, Austin, and Garfield, which are the toughest communities in Chicago, Austin and Humboldt Park. And through that, I visit nonprofits, they submit a grant, and then together with the board, we make decisions of awarding anywhere between $5,000 to $30,000, awarding together as a board over $1 million to nonprofits that are serving youth and addressing issues of employment and health in those communities of Humboldt Park, Austin, West Garfield, and Lawndale. So as we have developed and grow, we continue to do the local work and the individual work of discipleship, but we also understand that now God has called us to be a greater blessing and to use our experience to serve in different capacities. So we continue to work and be of influence in other areas where we can mine the gift of youth. I think we want to give about a 5 or 7 minute break. If we could, I have almost about 8 or 9 to the hour. If we could take it to the hour, and you could have a stretch and water break because it's a little bit hot in here, and then we'll come back for questions and just a brief summary of our lessons learned. great conversations. If we could return back to our tables, it'll help us to summarize at least what we've tried. We've learned many lessons, but at least our 7 main lessons learned. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So lessons learned within our cultural context. And so we're going to go down quickly 7 of the main lessons that we have learned in working with youth and working in youth ministry. The first one we have learned is that youth don't choose their environment, they are simply born in it. Youth don't choose their environment, they are simply born into it. In other words, we don't treat youth according to the environment, according to their appearance, or according to what is their current home, community, or school environment. We don't judge them by the outward appearance. They didn't choose that. They were born into it. What we have also learned is that youth are a reflection of what's going on in the home. And so many times the conflict that we face in youth group or engaging with our youth is a manifestation of the secrets and the lies that the parents are living at home. And so please remember that. The people you are called to serve, that youth, they didn't choose to be selling drugs. Well, they chose to be a drug dealer. But they were probably pushed to that because their parents were busy working too many jobs, or they didn't have their father abandoned them. They don't have the economics, their mom is working 2 jobs, and they have a burden and a pressure to provide for their mom and their sibling. And so the only easy way to make the money is probably to sell the drugs. However, though that might be their current environment, doesn't mean that we allow them and justify them to stay in there. But remember, they don't choose their environment, they are born into it, and because of that, there is the hope of transformation. We did a handout, and that's just a sample for you to later on reflect upon. And it starts with the word context. So in our community, we feel these are the 4 big deterrents that affect youth development in our community: violence, poverty, abuse, and apathy. So those are across the top. That might not be the elements in your community or in your context or in your church or youth group. Feel free to replace those with whichever are the 4 top. I mean, there's definitely much more. We had youth in our youth group that were dealing with eating disorder, teen violence, dating violence, where they're going out as a boy and a girl are dating and the boy is beating up the girl or the girl is beating up the boy. We had cutters, right? So, but at least we can categorize it in the top 4, and that's where we start our focus of the needs that we are addressing. Knowing that violence affects everything. Even the Center for Disease Control, when you look up violence they consider it as a disease, it'll tell you it affects apathy, it affects youth development, it affects their economics, it affects everything inside of a community and the life of a youth. So when you write the 4 deterrents for your context on that table, then have a reflection of what that means in the life of the youth at home, what that means in the life of the youth at school, and what that means in the life of the youth in the community. So for us, what we would do is violence. What does violence in the home look like for our kids? What does violence look in our school? And so, in Chicago Public School, no school is alike. So we would have to learn the culture of the schools, what was happening at the school, because more likely than not, as their friends and their peers started coming to youth group, that same challenge of violence, whatever, if it was drugs or trafficking drugs, it would show up in our youth group. If it was gang violence, you would see them, starting to try to form cliques in our youth group. In our years of experience, did we have sometimes trafficking of drugs in our youth group? Yes, we did. Where? In the bathroom. When? During the service. Our service was 1 hour because we never thought that their attention span, even with all the music and all the hype and all the pump, we never thought that their attention would stick more than 1 hour. And in that hour sometimes, and when we started noticing after like 4 months what's happening, people going to the bathroom too much, we figured it out. And sure enough, then one of the youth told us that that's what was happening too. So the youth themselves become stewards of the youth group environment. So that chart that I provided to you that says context will help you identify the challenges in your community and with your youth within the 4 primary factors or challenges that your youth face. Once you identify those needs, then you begin to develop strategies and responses to them. Apathy is huge for the Latino community in the urban context. Many of our youth have not even gone downtown. Downtown, which is less than 2 miles away from our community. So Mayor Rahm Emanuel's vision of that every youth can think and envision that they're in downtown, even though it's getting harder with economics, it's the reality of many of the youth in Chicago. The second lesson learned is that though they are born into that environment, they don't have to live or die in that environment. They should know and believe that God has given them free will. We promote that to every youth. You have the power to choose. So they should know and believe that God has given them free will, loves them unconditionally, and that they possess potential. So we instill in our youth, you have the power to choose. And then whatever the choice is, there's responsibilities, and you should be responsible for that. You choose if you want to come to church. You choose if you don't want to. You choose if you want to go to youth-led prayer. You choose if you don't want to. We wouldn't make them go. We know that there's a problem. When there was a youth leader being developed, we know there was a disconnect in that youth leader if he's telling the youth, you have to go now to youth-led prayer. We will, whoa. We will put them to the side and say, no, they do not have to go to youth-led prayer. They choose. We empower them. We give them the freedom and liberty. The youth want youth-led prayer. Those that want to will go to it. The only thing that we're required to do was, if they wanted to be part of open gym and everything, was to go to that 1 hour service. But if they didn't want to go to youth service, they could always, and they were not saved, they could just come to the outreach activities. And they didn't have to come to church because we know God was going to reach them. Unconditional love. Love them just as they are, which is sometimes hard for the church, right? If a youth doesn't fit their image or their pattern. When we began our youth group, it was primarily with church kids. When they began to reach out to their friends, our youth group became multi-ethnic. There came a time that the youth group was not representative of the Latino church, and conflict began to arise between the youth group, the youth leadership, the youth mission, and the local church. But you know what? We would love them unconditionally. Whatever they wear, whatever, their appearance and things, their piercings, we would allow them to exercise still their gift in all of our ministry areas. And potential. And you already heard from my husband his analogy of the oil well and precious stone. The third lesson learned is that we have to be responsible to remain relative and responsive. What we did in youth group 15 years ago is not what we're doing today. The youth that were youth members of Powerhouse 15 years ago are not the ones that are there today. So even in our worship styles And even in our ministry activities, all of that has evolved and changed. And you can't cut out a youth program that does the same thing all the time, because it could lose the connectivity to that generation. The other thing with Latinos is that Latinos is the race category that's given unto us. But if you've been with Latinos long enough, you know that we are all different, right? We are all from different countries, different dialects, different backgrounds, which makes it even more complicated, different colors of skin, different accents. Our words not always mean the same things, right? And not only that, the complexity adds as Latinos, as we are first, second, and third generation here in the U.S. Yet somehow we are classified as Latino as a whole. And so for us, how do we maintain relevant and relevancy to someone that's Ecuadorian as part of the youth group, someone that's African American, someone who is mixed with Polish and Cuban, and someone that is mixed with African American and Latin? And we would deal, how do we maintain ourselves relevant, responsive to those needs? And you have to ask that question. Is this speaking to our youth? Is this transformative? And when it doesn't, prune it, cut it out, stop doing it. Know what to stop doing. So I think there was one of the pictures that said never-ending to-do list. Did someone pick that up? Okay, so a new habit could be things to stop doing. And we have to look at our environment and figure that out. Maintain ourselves relevant and responsive. The one we went through the exercise is the next one, which is manage relationships that are important to youth. That is very strategic. Very strategic. So when the relationship with the youth leader has ended, the outcome, outcomes are elements that show signs of transformation. The results, the life-changing elements, are that you build the capacity for that youth to have successful relationships with all of their stakeholders. The fifth lesson learned is that you and I, the youth leaders or youth ministers or those called to serve youth, are responsible for creating a platform, a safe space where the youth can showcase their talent, gifts, and uniqueness. The youth service that we've built, other from the 10, 15-minute sermon that my husband would share, the rest of it was all youth-led. All of it. From the beginning prayer to the visitors' recognition, to the worship, to the closing, to the acknowledgments, were all youth-led. And with time, we started rotating and providing that platform for even some of the youth leaders that were called more into ministers and pastorship. Maximize their free time. So this was interesting. About 2 or 3 months ago, I was engaged in something with youth ministry at my job. And somebody made a comment, oh, well, you know, summer's coming around. It'll be slow time, downtime for youth ministry. And I didn't say nothing, but I was like, ooh, I wish you knew my context, right? Because for the urban context, youth ministry in the summer months is the busiest. We will maximize on that free time because during the school year, their school schedule and their family schedule is competing against any schedule that the youth group could have. At least for our kids, they don't have the luxury of going away for the summer or summer vacations away or anything of that nature. And if we don't provide a positive outlet, guess what? They'll be lost during the summer. And in the city, you know, Chicago has been in the news a lot for violence in the streets and how many teens have been dying, even though we've been improving by something of a percent, right? But they're still dropping. They're still dying. Even people that are not involved in gangs and drugs, youth, are still perishing because of a stray bullet, because they're looking for an outlet, and they're not in a safe place. So we are responsible for creating that safe space and that platform, and really think about the needs of the youth in your context, because youth ministry in every context doesn't mean that summer is the lightest. For urban context, it was when we would be the busiest, day and night and weekends, because we would have the summer program, and lo and behold, that was the biggest time for the biggest attendance in the youth group, on Wednesday nights, on Friday nights, and it was the biggest time of souls, because then they would be engaging with us in all the fun activities, summer job activities, come on Friday night, and lo and behold, look, I found Jesus. And then at the end of the summer, we would do a tent camp away from the city. You heard from my husband, this is the passion of what we do and the most important lesson, building one-on-one relationships with youth. And I'm going to let him share about how to build these relationships.
Something very simple that we all are already doing, living out the gospel. There are some young ladies and young men that will never enter into a church and get to know Jesus or Lord. But you will be their Jesus and Lord. Once you meet them, they don't have to go to a church because they'll see Jesus in you through relationship. I've come to learn that my greatest moments haven't been in a pulpit. It's been in a basketball court. It's been out in the street. It's been just giving a young man a hug, a handshake, an encouraging words, saying, good job, congratulations on graduating in high school. That connection, that relationship part, I cannot emphasize that because I didn't have that relationship. From the age of 15 to 19, even though I came from a very healthy home, parents are ministers, I became a gang member. Because in the church that I was in, literally, they were shoving the gospel down my throat. Put me in a small room, lock the door, and just read the word to me. At the end, open the door, see you next week, or see you the next day. I've come to learn that that's not the God that I serve. The God that I serve, he's a loving God that cares for what you need at the season that you're living. And I've learned through that relationship that I will be the Jesus of every young man and every young woman that I will come encounter with. They may not enter into a church, but as long as they see Jesus in you, they will be transformed. And sooner than later, they will go into the church. But if they don't see Jesus first in you, why would they want to go into the church? Youth are transparent, and youth want us as youth leader, as passionate youth leader that work with youth, to be transparent with them. One of the things that a young man once told me, it was 11 o'clock at night, a Friday night. I was taking him home in the church van, and as we were driving to his house, it was the oldest brother of three. He looked at me, he goes, Pastor, you're 40 plus years old. You can be in an island having fun with your boys. What motivates you to come every Friday night and play with us, share with us, and give us an encouraging word? Is your body all right? Are you okay? Are you keeping up? Because he will see. I will get bruises playing basketball. They're tough kids nowadays. They're built. So I looked at him in his eyes that night. I was impressed by the question. Well, the reason why, the motivation, is you seeing your life being transformed from being poor to riches. From not graduating from high school to graduating from college. To being the first one in your house. So just looking at you motivates me to do this every Friday night. If they don't see that passionate in you, they will never be transformed. So it all starts with us, with the passion. You know, I was asked to take over a church of 200 plus members to be the senior minister. And I had this discussion with my wife, and I was like, many seek that. Many will jump for the opportunity. But I think I was made and built for youth ministry for life. And once you know that, nobody can take you out of that. The fulfillment that I've had of working with youth, with relationships, the satisfying feeling no man can give or no money can buy. When you see a young man or a young woman's life being transformed forever and being married with a healthy, loving family, that's the greatest reward that God can give you. So I encourage you to leave this place today knowing that the key element to the youth ministry is relationship. Is being the father to the fatherless. Is being the hug and the love to those that don't even know the meaning of love. I waited 22 years for my father to hear him say, "I love you" for the first time. I met kids of 18 years of age that their father have never even said, "I love you," or they never even received a hug. Our job is to give that hug. Our job is to embrace that youth with a broken heart and mend it. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And to close our session, and I know we're going to segue into Q&A and lunch, the last one that I will share with a story is learning and knowing when to let go. And I want to share, we just got this email from one of our former Powerhouse members 2 days ago as we were preparing, actually Tuesday night as we were preparing. And she wrote, "My journey. My journey of a Christ-centered life began with my parents who, having witnessed the power of Christ in their lives, instilled in me and my brothers a passionate desire for truth. From birth to childhood and into my preteen years, Bethesda Christian Center provided an array of opportunities where I could learn, explore, and grow in my faith. Before becoming a part of the Powerhouse Youth Ministry, the church and my Christian education laid the foundation to my life in Christ. Upon becoming a member of Powerhouse Youth Ministry, I was socially awkward, extremely shy, and being born into first-generation immigrant parents was socially inept in a lot of ways. Despite these ugly duckling years, the abundance of love that was freely given by my family and the church allowed me to know, and she capitalized know, that I was loved. The summer before entering senior year at Northside College Prep High School, I was offered a position as a youth counselor by my youth pastor, Jorge Gonzalez, at the PH boot camp. The 6 weeks that followed showed me the true mark of a godly man, a man who despised my flaws and weaknesses, saw what many did not see in me, and doing just as Christ does in our lives. Demonstrated to me that my life had purpose and meaning. It was not so much the Bible teaching or classes, rather, it was the day-to-day interactions that proved to me that I was worthy to be known and worthy to be loved. On entering freshman year at Loyola University of Chicago, I was given leadership responsibilities in PH Dance Youth Ministry. I carried these responsibilities all through college until the age of 24, a period of character kneading that has proven to be one of the most rewarding and satisfying experiences. Currently, I'm attending the Park Community Church, and I work as a researcher at University of Illinois College of Medicine. My professional goals of entering medical school is becoming reality now. I have achieved a solid competitive score on one of the most painstaking tests, the MCAT, and will be submitting application in the upcoming months. As far as my spiritual life, I am taking a few pointers from King David in developing an intimate, honest, and repentance-filled relationship with my Father, my Heavenly Father, and more frequently find myself at cafes with my chai tea lattes, taking delight in the promise and teachings of my first love. Additionally, I serve at Bread of Life Ministries, giving food and clothing to the homeless, and I have joined a women's small group for accountability and community. My years in the youth ministry have molded and shaped me into the woman that I am, and as a result of seeking God zealously, I have learned to be a lion heart in spite of my flaws and weaknesses. Powerhouse Youth Ministry has most importantly taught me this one truth. that lives are transformed through open, honest, and loving relationships. This was, as we were preparing this outline and discussion for today, what we received. This is our life, this is our story, and we hope that you are encouraged and blessed by what you have heard today. Thank you.
Well, thank you to Rebecca and to Jorge for just a remarkable presentation. You see why I have been in love with them for 14 years. Thank you for coming. Rebecca asked me, once she got the email, should I surprise Jorge with this email during the lecture? I said, not if you don't want him to cry the entire time after you read it. So it's a lovely story. We do have lunch that is ready to be served, and we will continue to take questions. So please feel free to excuse yourself and begin our table fellowship and to talk among yourselves. And if anyone has questions, we'll do questions and answers now. But please remember, the live stream audience cannot pick up the sound unless we use the microphone. All right? So please excuse yourselves. We'll say a grace after we all get regathered. Who has a question for Jorge or Rebecca?
Okay. So it's incredible to hear how you guys focus a lot of your ministry on raising up the teens to be able to lead. How do you develop your youth leaders in your youth ministry, or how do you develop them?
So the way we basically learned how to do it was basically visiting the Gospels. What did Jesus do? How did he do it? Call them one by one. Engage with them, play with them. And if you've heard some of the things that we did, honestly and truthfully, that's what we did. Then there was a period of Jesus' time that he was set aside for the 12, or the ones that were called disciples. There was times that Jesus was with the multitude, and then there was times he was with the disciples, eating, breaking bread. We did that with those that we would identify and that they shared a desire to grow in this capacity. So apart from all the activities for the youth group, because we're meeting youth need where they're at, we would have separate, smaller group activities. Right, but at times, but age didn't matter, because, so she asked, this is with the adult leaders. Sometimes we had someone already aspiring in leadership at 14 in our junior powerhouse. So we would start cultivating and nurturing that there. And then we adapted Experiencing the Heart of Jesus by Max Lucado, and we actually started creating a two-year prong Bible study with those that were aspiring to be PH leaders. And that started early. That was during the time of our most growth of producing leaders. After that generation, and I think in this latter part, we've continued with that principle, but we dropped the text in the essence because the text was competing now with all of CPS requirements for academics. So kids now, when we started the youth group, the kids were not having demands for 3 and 4 hours of homework. And so then we were able to do that type of text and study and homework kind of thing for the leaders. As it became forward, now what's happening is building on the one-on-one, and actually now we have young adults that are actually getting formal training. We have one that's in North Park University. We have one that has gone to World Harvest Bible School. So now they're actually seeking formal training, and some are actually in academia, seeking formal credentialing for youth development work or child development work. So that has taken the place of that, but most and all of our work for training is really hands-on, walking with us, and then we have one that's here this week.
Hi. Rebecca, you said that when you were having your second son, you had to stay in bed in the ministry of intercession. I was just wondering if you can talk more on that and like the fruit that came from that.
So the ministry of intercession is dedicating time to prayer. And so in knowing the needs of the youth and the needs of the youth leaders and the needs of my husband, we always have conversations. During that time, I would wait till 2 a.m. when he would get home, or 1 a.m., because kids would make it to the youth group, and then we would bus them all back home. As long as they made it somehow to the youth activity, we would take them all back home. And sometimes that would mean a lot of hours taking kids back home because our transportation was quite limited. So we would have a lot of conversations. And basically then I'm taking that to the Lord and would be investing lots of time in praying to God, presenting their needs. Also asking the Holy Spirit to lead me in how to pray. Sometimes we do not know how to pray or what to pray. And so we can ask the Holy Spirit to help us to pray for those that are in need, to help us to pray for those that love. And he begins to, in a sense of relationship, begins to give us an inclination of how to pray, whether it be through scriptures that we have learned, and so that's how basically the ministry of intercession, it's not just praying maybe for 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It really is a lengthy amount of a prayer where you basically are what we call like standing in the gap. Sometimes the bondages or the blindfold or what someone is experiencing is so hard and like that yoke that we had in the pictures. And so they can't even cry out for help. And so what we do in intercession is ask God to help us to pray on their behalf, kind of stand in the gap for them. And for that, basically, we ask God to soften their hearts or to help them and to intervene in their experience so that they can, be able to breathe and to reach out to Him and to understand that they are loved. So that is the ministry of intercession. I know there was a question earlier, and I mentioned I would be addressing it. And it was in relating to youth jobs. Economics is big in our community, and I think it was around this table. And so part of that question was when youth are needing jobs and how do they connect and how do they... So what we would do is that one thing is we would connect with our city offices to find out when they were going to be opening the applications for summer jobs for our teens, or even job training programs in our community, or workforce development programs. Somebody might want to do nursing, but they cannot even afford to go to college or a small college. Well, they can have an introductory course at some of our social service agencies for free and get that first step in and that first CNA certification. We will help them and connect to that. There was a time period of our life where obviously our ministry could not afford and help us to sustain our household. So we developed an event business, and we would have events every weekend. And so guess who was working the events? The youth groups, the youth who needed jobs. And so basically as the event business was producing a livelihood for us, it also created an opportunity for them to develop job skills and get their first job experience so then they can build a resume and then be able to transition to a job. So at times it wasn't jobs that go sell Krispy Kreme donuts and go collect out with a can. It was actually teaching them life skills, teaching them work skills, and creating either before social enterprising existed. We were living it out, and we were practicing it. And for many of our youth today that are young adults, they're like, my first job was at the event. So we would do weddings, we would do cotillions, and during Saturday nights and Sunday afternoon and nights, we were doing parties, and everybody would get paid more than minimum wage, everyone. And so that's kind of like how we would, meet some of the needs of our youth by creating those outlets and that experience. Because sometimes for some of our kids, even having the discipline to arrive at work on time or the responsibility of money management, it's a challenge.
Thank you for when you come to the relationship, to build the relationship, especially one-to-one relationship, you have to give time for your members, for the youth. That's the challenge as a pastor. And how do you manage your time? How do you give every youth a good one-to-one relationship, for example, for when they need you in their special occasion. How do you be there? And the question I have is, how do you manage your time? That makes you busy with other responsibilities you have with other church.
So, when we had the first activity, I did mention I'm reading a book about an unhurried life. So part of it, I'm still learning and growing on that part. But when it works with a youth group, there is a time to roll up the sleeves and be hands-on and do everything yourself. That is the reality. There was a time that my husband would be mopping the court before the gym opened, sweeping it, cleaning the whole game room, opening it up in time for the youth group. Youth group would come in, take all the youth back home, come back, clean it for the basketball league that would run on Saturday. So, and that was another job thing too, where the youth would then eventually manage the basketball league and would get stipends for doing that. So the reality is that time is always ticking, but there really comes a time where you have to let go, and the way that you let go is by replicating yourself in the life of others. As we've done this work, there have been youth that from some at a very early age and some a little bit later that have a genuine call and desire to serve God at the level that we do. And so what we do is that we build and invest in those individuals more time, because they basically become an extension of us. And when we cannot be there any longer, or where we cannot reach, they will be able to reach. Correct. As we go into our 40s, there's going to be disconnect between us and the new generation. We had opted years ago to not have Facebook because we thought that was invading the privacy of our teens. And we didn't want our ministry and what we did to their individual lives to be influenced by anything that was on Facebook. That was our own personal decision, might not be yours. However, youth ministry today could be done at a very different way with Facebook, and it can be done effectively. I would have to go take a class and figure that all out. But there's a young adult, or there's a high schooler, or there's might be even a junior high that they love computers and they have it. They have how to reach the youth through the Facebook. We replicate God's heart in us and God's calling in us. We expose ourselves. We become transparent with what God has done in our life and how he has called us and what he's doing in our lives. They learn from that, and they manifest it within their ability and talent. And so therefore, there's going to come a time that you spend time, I was sharing this earlier, you spend time with the multitude, but then there's going to have to be time that you actually dedicate and commit to those that are called to be your disciples. And those disciples will eventually become your leader. So time management is not a science, it's an art. And so we have to continue to invest and look at that. But you cannot reach the masses or reach more than 30 or 40 youth if you don't replicate yourself. Right. I always think, even in business, succession planning begins from day one. Every job I go into, succession planning begins from day one. And it's not that you plan that you're going to be an end. But if you're really invested into a mission, you will prepare that mission to succeed even without you. And that is our responsibility for the youth group, the youth mission, the youth ministry, and the youth life to continue succeeding and living and thriving even without us. Because we're not the one transforming, it's God.
Right. I'll add to it. Good Friday, I was supposed to give my sermon, and my youngest son, my 7-year-old son, his face was swollen, so we took him to the emergency room. I called the senior pastor, let them know that I was not going to show up, because I believe my first ministry will always be my family first, right? How can I take care of a multitude if I can't take care of my own son, right? So I called, and I called 2 leaders that I've been training from the very beginning, Brother Javi and Brother Georgie. The service ran like if I was there, even better. People got saved, everybody was happy. Why? Because we got to be ready. We got to be ready. And there's going to be times that we are busy. And we have to take care of our first ministry. So we have to clone ourselves. We have to empower, train, right? So when we can't make it, the show must go on. The service is going to be blessed because there's somebody else that's running the same vision you're running.
And even on Wednesday, yesterday, when we were taking the flight, we had one of our teens that was graduating from high school yesterday. So he obviously, he has a father, but kind of absent father. So when he found out we were not going to be in town for his graduation, he was downcast. But we told him, don't worry, we love you, we're going to be here for you. And on Tuesday afternoon, we had two of our youth leaders, one of them who is only a sophomore in high school, and the other one who's a young adult, come to our house with the card for us to sign because they were going to his graduation on Wednesday. We didn't tell them. He reached out to them because of how they have been there for him. And so the tickets that were going to go to us went to them. And then on their own, because we have done that for them, they were doing it then for this now younger youth.
You mentioned you had some experiences where the kids were selling drugs in the bathroom, and we work at a residential facility. Kids have come to us from detention, and so we deal with that a lot. But how do you handle that? You want them to come to these events, you want them to be involved spiritually, and you don't want to send them out, but yet you don't want them to continue that behavior, especially if it's dangerous behavior to others. So how do you handle that?
Well, I'll give you a personal experience. I was teaching on a Friday night, and I saw two young men go into the restroom. I already knew what was happening. I waited. Another two young men went in. I took the mic, put it on the pulpit. I said, excuse me for a second. I'll be right back. Went straight to the bathroom. Once I entered the bathroom, they were negotiating, selling the drugs. They weren't shocked. But I'm here to buy something. I'm here to make a deal with you. I'm willing to buy all the drugs if you promise me that you will never do this in the house of the Lord again. I'm committed to your life. I want to be part of your life. But if you continue doing this, I'm not going to be part of your life. Those words were enough. Never again. They sold drugs in the house of the Lord. I didn't have to buy them. They flushed them down the toilet that day. Came with me into the service. I never forget that day. Because if I would have not taken that time to put the mic down and go directly to the problem with the solution, it would have kept on. Or if I would have went into that restroom and kicked those boys out, I'm just like the world. I'm rejecting them, but not fixing the problem.
On the network piece, do you guys go out seeking the network, or the network seeking you guys out, like for the funding of the factory for the basketball center?
So because I've developed both in the church and in the nonprofit sector, network could mean different things nowadays for me than what it did when we were in the youth group. But reality is, when in the earlier years of our youth group, we were just doing our call. And within our context, I gave up my career in private, in corporate. My husband gave up his job, and we were invested in the youth group. We were just living out our call. We were just loving kids. We would roll out those portable $99 basketball courts. Now they're $99. I think when we bought our first one was $129. We had some moms donate some food, raise the money, and invest the money into that. Any little fundraiser that we would do, we would try to find what the teens were into as far as sports, gaming, activity, and we would try to save up for that. So when they come to youth group, they could see that media relationship that they're having inside our youth environment. So that's all we were doing. But then when people started seeing and hearing about the transformation, people then wanted to know about what was happening. And then they reached out for relationship. and to learn and to, with the hopes and with the faith that what God was doing in our community and our youth group will happen in theirs. And then that's how it happened. And the development of our church and the youth group was part of our church vision. So very much the primary workers and funders of what we were doing in the youth group was our local church. But then obviously, God would send people along the way to then help us. But it wasn't that we were going out there looking for the resources. We were just busy going in. Obviously now, with my years in social services and different, then networking and fundraising can mean different things. However, I will tell you, I know that's what it means for my careers and my jobs, but we don't have that heavy structure in our youth group. What I can say is the first grant that I ever wrote, that I ever administered, that I ever was responsible and managed was for the tutoring program. It started with a $10,000 grant. Within 3 years, it grew to over $60,000 because of what was already happening in our youth group, and we were providing results for the city at a larger number than other entities who were receiving much more money. And from there, then God has promoted me now to be, I've gone through the experience of being VP and managing over $15 million. And so now, a $3 million grant doesn't really mean anything, but the principles are still the same with which I managed the $10,000 grant.
They're very modest, so they're not going to tell the stories on themselves. So many people think I have to develop connections, I have to develop grants, I have to create a big building before I can do my youth ministry. They just did their youth ministry, and then the world said, how can we help? I've been on the street with them when Mayor Daley of Chicago ran across the street to say hello and support them. Rebecca was the Latina outreach coordinator for Mayor Rahm Emanuel. The world comes to where they see God at work, and that's what they've done.
How are the Powerhouse youth integrated in the larger church? And I will assume, because a lot of Latino-based churches with youth, that pretty much everything is done in English. Would you say, is this church at large, our services in Spanish, English? How has the language become, is that a challenge? Specifically for the young adults who are now in their late 20s, are they fully integrated in the life of the church outside of Powerhouse?
So through the different generations, and our church responses have also been different. There has been times that the church has had translation equipment. At times they have had dual translation, where live translation is happening, similar to our story earlier today. And then there has been times where for a period of time there might have been a test model of an English service ran by, or pastored by someone else. So our church has gone through those pieces, but they're still, to the core, held to how they traditionally were founded as a Latino church. And even themselves, they've had to deal with diversity, because when they first started, the church started per se as a primarily Puerto Rican church. Our church, the Bethesda Christian Center nowadays, is multi-ethnic in the Latino culture. So they've had to diversify worship, and everything has changed because of all the cultures now being together. And so that has added complexity. So we deal with diversity at a whole different context and level than just being a multi-ethnic church. And those are very difficult conversations, and at times conflictual, but they're good conversations. They help us to grow and to see God's heart in that. And for our youth group, part of learning to let them go, at least for us, has been the fact that they're there for a season and grow, and we are called to build the kingdom. So we have never approached youth ministry as trying to grow our local church. So to be honest with you, there is a large number of the youth that have come through the Powerhouse that are not even currently at our local church. But they are, like this young lady is now at Park Community, because as a young adult, that's where she's being cultivated and nurtured. And then she's choosing to be part of the women's small group and hold her accountable in community. She knows what church is. And that church tends to be, more college, and obviously considering where she's at with her career, tends to have that type of population and culture and support environment more than our church would do. But we're perfectly fine with that because she is in love with the Lord, she is growing, and that is blessed. Now for our local church, that's very hard. That is very hard, and we haven't found a solution for that. But when we see that part of the relationship with youth is the church, then the other positive side is that we do have another large group that do engage with our local church and the Spanish primary church. And so the way they do that is that since we built the youth service, even though it's 1 hour, with all the elements of a regular church service, the last 2 hours or 2.5 hours, they can easily integrate. So they are serving in PowerPoint, they are serving in praise and worship, they're doing in dance, they're doing sound. And so they're doing a lot of things in the adult service. So they might not be able to connect at the level of language, and they might not be able to connect at a sense of understanding what the gospel, but they're living it. They're serving during the adult service. And that's how we've kind of balanced. But it's kind of like a pro and con as it pertains to that piece.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roman. Well, first, I would like to applaud these two gentlemen, George and the other guy from your ministry, because they've been representing very well as young men of God. Yes, they have. The question that I have is a question that I've been struggling with through the years, and maybe you can give me some insight with this. When dealing with the youth, how important is it to be transparent with them right out the gate? You know, and when I say transparent, I'm talking about telling them about yourself, your story, your struggles. How important is that? Or is it vitally important to do so?
Yes, it is very important for you to share your personal story. Because your personal story is going to be the story that's going to change their thinking, way of thinking, the way they're heading. And they're going to see that you're not just making it up, but you actually were there and you changed. So if you did it, they can do it too. They can do it too. So it's very key for you to be transparent and to let them, yes, I did struggle with this addiction at one point. Yes, I did. I was a gang member, and this is what I did. Once you connect with them with your story, and you through being transparent, they're gonna connect with you. They're gonna open up. They're gonna be like, wait a minute, this guy's just like me. He failed, but now look at where he's at. So with that said, they're gonna open up to you. They're going to be willing to tell you their struggles, their doubts, their questions. And you're going to be able to answer those questions because you lived it. See? You lived it. So that's why God has placed you in that very place at that point in time. Because he knows that you're the one that's supposed to minister to that young man and transform their lives. But if you don't share that story, because you may feel shame or what are they going to think of me, they might be lost forever. So it's very key for you to share that story.
And I would say it's also important when you share that story. We don't use our story as an advertisement of recruitment. We use our story when the Holy Spirit tells us to release it because it's going to connect and transform our life. And ultimately, if it weren't for God's grace, our stories are all the same. I mean, sin is sin to God, regardless. And there's no shame of our stories because God's grace has redeemed us from all of that. And that if we want our youth to be released from their shame and guilt that society or their parents or the church has put on them, we have to show them and reflect to them what grace is. And what God has done with us, He will do it also with them.
Wonderful. The food I keep promising actually is here. I have one public service announcement. Pastors Jorge and Rebecca will be presenting tomorrow night at the Ignite dinner. Araceli would like to describe a little bit for us. There's still space. You can RSVP.